In the year 1016, England was falling apart. Kings fought for power, nobles betrayed one another, entire regions switched sides depending on who seemed strongest. And across the North Sea, Viking armies continued to arrive on English shores. For generations, the people of England had feared the sight of dragon-headed ships appearing on the horizon. Those ships often brought fire, destruction, and death. But this time was different, because among the invaders was a man who wanted far more than treasure. He wasn't interested in a quick raid. He wasn't interested in filling his ships with silver and returning home. He wanted a crown. His name was Canute, and he would become the most powerful Viking ruler in history. This is the story of the Viking who conquered England. Long before Canute became king, England had already spent centuries dealing with Viking attacks. The first major Viking raids began in the late 8th century. Small groups of Scandinavian warriors crossed the sea and attacked wealthy monasteries and coastal settlements. At first these raids were occasional, but over time they became larger, more organized, and far more dangerous. Entire Viking armies began arriving in England. Some came to loot, others came to settle permanently. Gradually, large areas of England fell under Viking influence. The English fought back whenever they could, but the Viking threat never truly disappeared. By the time Canute was born, the struggle between England and Scandinavia had already shaped generations of history. Canute grew up in a world where power was earned through strength. Scandinavia was a harsh place. Kings fought rival kings. Warriors fought for glory. And ambitious rulers dreamed of expanding their influence across the sea. For a young prince, leadership was not learned in a comfortable palace. It was learned aboard ships battling storms and on battlefields where a single mistake could mean death. His father was Sweyn Forkbeard, king of Denmark. Sweyn was one of the most feared rulers in northern Europe. He believed England could be conquered completely. And unlike many Viking leaders before him, he intended to make that dream a reality. Young Canute watched his father build armies, launch invasions, and challenge powerful kingdoms. He also learned something important. England was rich, its farmland was productive. Its towns were larger than most Scandinavian settlements. Its churches held immense wealth. To ambitious rulers, England was not simply another kingdom. It was the ultimate prize. In 1013, Sweyn launched a massive invasion of England. The campaign moved quickly. English resistance collapsed. The English king fled the country. For the first time, it appeared that the Viking conquest of England was complete. Sweyn became king of England, but victory did not last. Only a few months later, he died unexpectedly. His sudden death threw everything into chaos. Many Danish leaders wanted to abandon the campaign. English nobles began restoring their former king, and Canute found himself in an impossible position. He was young. He lacked experience, and many people doubted he could hold on to his father's achievements. Eventually, he was forced to retreat and return to Denmark. For many leaders, that would have been the end of the story, but Canute refused to give up. Instead of accepting defeat, he spent the next few years rebuilding his strength. He gathered allies. He secured ships. He recruited warriors. And most importantly, he prepared for another invasion. This time he would return not as the son of a conqueror, but as a conqueror himself. When Canute finally sailed back to England, he arrived with a larger army and a clear objective. He was no longer interested in raids. He wanted permanent control. The war that followed was brutal. Battles erupted across the country. Cities changed hands repeatedly. Villages were destroyed. Thousands of soldiers lost their lives. Standing against him was one of England's most determined leaders, Edmund Ironside, the son of the English king, a warrior known for his courage and refusal to surrender. Again and again, Edmund rallied English forces. Again and again, he challenged the invading Vikings. For months, neither side could secure a decisive victory. England remained trapped between two powerful rivals. Then came the battle that would decide everything, the Battle of Asandun. As the two armies prepared for combat, the future of England hung in the balance. On one side stood Edmund Ironside, a king fighting for his homeland. On the other stood Canute, a Viking determined to seize the throne. The clash was fierce. Shield walls crashed into one another. Axes struck armor. Spears flew through the air. Warriors fought at close range in a desperate struggle for survival. For hours the outcome remained uncertain. Both armies suffered heavy losses. Neither side showed any sign of retreat, but battles are often decided by leadership, discipline, and timing. As the fighting continued, Canut's forces slowly gained the advantage. The English lines began to weaken. Momentum shifted, and eventually the army of Edmund Ironside broke apart. The battle was over. Canute had won. England was temporarily divided between the two rulers, but fate intervened once again. Only weeks later, Edmund died unexpectedly. With his greatest rival gone, Canute became king of all England. For the first time, a Viking sat securely upon the English throne. Many people expected revenge. Many expected harsh rule. After all, Canute was a foreign conqueror. But he surprised everyone. Instead of ruling through fear alone, he focused on stability. He kept much of the English administration intact. He worked with local nobles. He supported the church. And he carefully presented himself as a legitimate king rather than an occupying invader. The strategy worked. England became more stable than it had been in years. The kingdom slowly recovered from decades of conflict. Yet Canute's ambitions extended far beyond England. In 1018, he inherited Denmark. Now he controlled both sides of the North Sea, but he wasn't finished. Over the following years, he expanded his influence even further. Eventually, he gained control of Norway as well. What he created was extraordinary. Historians call it the North Sea Empire. At its peak, this empire connected England, Denmark, and Norway under a single ruler. It stretched across vast distances and united territories that had once spent generations fighting each other. Trade flourished. Ports grew busier. Merchants traveled more freely. Goods moved across the sea in greater quantities than ever before. For ordinary people, the empire brought new opportunities. Craftsmen found new markets. Traders expanded their businesses. Sailors carried goods between kingdoms connected by one crown. The same ships that had once transported Viking raiders now transported trade, taxes, and royal authority. In many ways, Canute transformed Viking power. He proved that Vikings could do more than conquer. They could govern. They could administer. They could build something lasting. For a brief moment in history, one man controlled much of northern Europe. His influence reached farther than almost any Viking ruler before him. As his power grew, stories about him spread across the continent. One famous legend tells of how his followers constantly praised him and exaggerated his greatness. To teach them a lesson, Canute ordered his throne placed beside the sea. As the tide approached, he commanded the waves to stop. The sea ignored him completely. The lesson was simple. Even the most powerful king in the world cannot command nature itself. Whether the story is true or not, it reveals how people viewed his power. By that point, Canute had become a legendary figure. But no empire lasts forever. When Canute died in 1035, the foundations of his empire began to weaken. His successors struggled to maintain control. Rivalries emerged. Territories drifted apart, and the great North Sea Empire slowly fragmented. Within a generation, much of what he had built had disappeared. Yet his legacy endured. For centuries, Vikings had been feared as raiders arriving from across the sea. But Canute changed that image. He demonstrated that Vikings could become kings, empire builders, statesmen, and rulers of powerful nations. He did not conquer England for a season. He did not conquer it for treasure. He conquered it for a throne. And in doing so, he became the most powerful Viking king the world had ever known. But while Canute built the greatest Viking empire in history, another Viking was preparing for a journey that would make him a legend. A warrior who would fight across distant lands, serve in foreign armies, accumulate enormous wealth, and eventually become known as the last great Viking king. His name was Harald Hardrada, and his story is even more incredible.